Hey you, it's me, Psychic Sean. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I am so excited to start this series of Psychic Sean Answers. I had so many different questions that I could have used and go through and I was having a hard time figuring out exactly what should be episode 1. And I think I found it by accident. So welcome to episode 1 of Psychic Sean Answers, Haunted Dolls, Energy Echoes, and Psychometry. So let's get into it. First of all, what prompted this was someone who commented on its recent TikTok about how they had haunted dolls. And I want to make it very clear that none of my videos ever are meant to judge anyone, humiliate anyone, make fun of them. We don't stand that. I want to make that very clear because I grew up in a severe bullying aspect of life. And I understand that people have different aspects of life and different ways of living their lives. And all of us find that a little different. We all experience the world and the spirit world differently. So we're going to respect each other here. We're always going to make sure that we try our best to be unconditionally loving to every person, because I can't say what your viewpoint is, nor can you say what mine is, because we see it differently, right? But let's get into this topic that I get a lot as a psychic medium of 20 years about haunted objects, haunted dolls, and what's really going on. So first off, let me talk about the fact that I do not believe that objects are haunted ever for any reason. Haunting is this idea that a soul or the spirit of a person is trapped in this object, and that this object has become imbued by their consciousness and their personality, and that somehow that spirit is using that tool, that object, that inanimate object, to exist in the physical world after it has died. That's just not happening. I've worked for so long in my development. I've been speaking with spirits and seeing them and experiencing them for at least 20 years, since I was a child, so probably at least 30. And I've been developing and studying and training and learning about spiritualism and the spirit world for well into 15 years, on top of the extra 5 that I was doing working as a psychic and sensing spiritual world around me. And I have always felt energy in homes, in places, and I have seen and experienced spirits in places, but there was never really a consciousness there. It's what I call an energy echo. Imagine going to a giant canyon or a large area where there's a lot of rocks and screaming and getting an echo, and it reverberates back. That's kind of what that energy really is. We know that quartz, we know that stone, we know that water can hold energy, especially moving water. And we know that these energies can get sort of trapped there, but it's not a consciousness. It is just an echo of the energy that the living produce. Animals produce it, trees produce it. It's why when you go to a field that has been gone through deforestation, you feel like a death has been there, because you can feel the energy of the trees that belong there, but there's something missing. It's not alive anymore because it's an echo. And so when we talk about haunted dolls, I understand that there is this feeling that there's something alive in this object. And of course, it does expand past dolls. It can be toys, it can be places, rooms, tiles of a floor, like ceramic tiles, have energy in them. And every human being on earth has the ability to feel energy. It's why we might sense that a friend isn't feeling well, or we might feel that we're being lied to, or that we feel that there's energy in a doll. And this isn't saying that it's haunted. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with thinking that there is energy in any object, because there is. But to say that there is a conscious spirit that has died and become trapped in an inanimate object and not gone home back to spirit is damaging to those who are healing in grief, because it is overall false. And I do not believe that most people are trying to scam anyone, and don't believe anyone intends to be harmful with these topics. But it can be, because I know that I wouldn't like the idea that my mother, who the last 2 years of her life was painful and tragic and sad, got trapped here on earth and didn't get the chance to cross over into spirit. I know that from a human aspect, when I'm on vacation, after a while, I get extremely tired and I miss my own bed. And I know that nothing is going to stop me from getting home. And when I get home, I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to go straight back to my house. When I'm craving going back to my bed, I don't think of going to a hotel. I don't think of going to somebody else's couch. I think about getting home and going to my bed. And that's really kind of how spirit sees it when they cross over. When the body dies, the soul disconnects and goes back to spirit. It goes home for everyone. And so why do we see these dolls or these toys or these objects that seem to have possessed or haunted energy? Well, it's called an energy echo. If you were to put an object in a room or a house where there's a lot of violence, that violence, that intensity, that that low vibrational but high intensity energy is going to soak into everything in its vicinity, even the ground of the property, the walls of the house. If that energy is not cleansed away through whatever spiritual process you use, maybe you personally don't have a spiritual process. Maybe you go to elders in a community who know how to take care of these things, regardless of what your faith is. But if you don't clear out that energy, it is going to radiate, albeit a weaker form, that negativity of that violence. But the polar opposite exists as well. If there's a house full of love and joy and happiness and warmth, that's going to radiate into the walls as well. However, why do we not tend to see that as much? Well, the people in a household that grow up in a warm, loving environment, which, let's face it, isn't all too common to have a completely and utterly loving home. There's always going to be negative days. We're human. But people who grow up in a loving home or around loving spaces, the body, the soul soaks that up as much as possible. It's like water to a dehydrated person. The soul lives on love. And so it's going to take the energy that it recognizes as much as possible. And there will be some fallout. There will be extra that gets left behind in an area. It's why when you hold a watch or a ring, say a wedding ring, great example, of say a loved one who has passed, and you just feel love, and it's, although at a weakened aspect, you feel that love and it's just so warm. That is an energy echo. But that love is in that ring. It is in that object. And then when we go to the opposite end of that, the violence, we don't want to soak that up. We don't want to accept violence and anger and hatred into ourselves. Our soul doesn't want to own this. And it takes some, because like all the other objects in that room, we are bombarded with it. And it's very difficult to do anything with that, unless you do a lot of healing and a lot of work to let it go, which the doll is inanimate, so it can't do. You're going to let some of that go, but you're going to hold on to a bit. But the room around you is going to be irradiated. It's going to be filled with that excess violence and hatred and anger. So that's why we tend to see a lot of negative objects, a lot of negative energy-filled objects. And negative energy is very physical. It's very base. And so it has a much more harsh punch to it. And when we interact with it, like the same polarities of a magnet, because we're talking about spiritual energy here, so it doesn't exactly work the same as the physical world does. But when you take two north poles of a magnet, they repel each other, because that energy is in opposition of each other. It doesn't work. It's too similar. When we face this negative energy in spirit, those two opposing forces really clash. The love in you does not want to accept that violence, does not want to let that violence in. And that violence, that angry, negative energy, is somewhat trying to survive. Not on a conscious level, but on an existence level. Its vibration is there. And when you feel it, your love and your light energy pushes against it, making you feel like there's a clash of energy. And there really isn't. And what's going to happen is your energy and its energy are going to sort of not mix. And it's going to give you a very negative feeling. It's going to make you feel something's off. It's going to make you feel like there's a bit of an oppressive energy around you. And that's just not the case. It's just life energy. We don't realize how much energy we put out on a daily basis. You simply telling someone I hate you is enough to leak into a room around you. And so that's why I'm very conscious about using words that are very loving and uplifting, because we don't want to muddy the waters that our energy needs. Of course, I am human. I've said a lot of negative things in my life, and I work hard to take them back. So if we're going to talk about haunted dolls and the idea of them, let's talk about something that would be considered what could really be happening. Let's discuss energy echoes, but let's also discuss, like we did in that Harvest part about the haunted dolls, energy echoes with that are what is residual energy that is left over. Energy echoes can be picked up by psychics, mediums. Most people can pick it up. Everyone has the ability to feel emotions, therefore we can feel energy. So just know that you're doing something psychic. Energy echoes are harmless. They're not going to hurt you. They feel off, but they absolutely can be diminished, removed, or handled. You don't have to be clergy. You don't have to be a shaman. If you can go in there with a simple idea of what you're doing to cleanse things, or if you go in there with a lot of love and overpower the negative energy, you should be fine. The object does not need to be regarded as some evil, haunted object. A lot of this started with ghost hunters whose names I shall not mention because I don't want to get under the wrath. But, yeah. So, one of the other things that we can talk about this is that spirits, actual conscious loved ones who have crossed over, will come and interact with objects and can give the perception that something is haunted, and they're not. So I would like to introduce you to an object that I received after a seance that has been manipulated by an object, manipulated by a loved one who has passed on. Say hello to Scotty, Scotland. I had the absolute pleasure of attending some seances with a phenomenal physical medium by the name of Scott Milligan, who is in England. And he works to go into an extremely deep, heavy trance state where spirit uses the energy of the physical medium, Scott, to produce enough energetic energy in the room, energetic ectoplasm, energetic phenomenon in order to move objects in the room. And we will all, so everybody in the seance will go into this room, and you are basically stripped down to your skivvies. You can go in with a t-shirt and a pair of pants. You're not allowed to wear any kind of jewelry. If you do have jewelry, it has to be taped to your finger like a wedding band. It has to be like duct taped to your finger. You're not allowed to bring anything in your pockets. You will be checked. They wand you with a metal detector wand. They do not allow anything brought into the room that the medium has not brought in, which is toys, like I just showed you, like the bear, or like hula hoops, or like a drum, a little child's drum. When we go in there, we are sitting like elbow to elbow, like everybody's touching. There's no space between us. And we have to hold hands. Through the entire demonstration, you have to hold hands, and you are claustrophobically next to somebody. The medium sits in what's called a cabinet in this space that's covered in curtains, and they start working and going down before you even get in the room. Once everyone starts piling in, the medium kind of wakes up and is presented to the people in the room by his partner, Darren. Darren then randomly chooses to, I think four people, to inspect the room with everybody present. And they inspect the room, they go in, they check on the toys, they look for strings, they look for trapdoors, they pat the medium down. When I tell you they pat the medium down, he has talked about stories where he has, in other seances that he has performed, uncomfortably been patted down. The whole point of the 4 checkers is to make sure that there's nothing at all tricky about the seance, okay? And they check his chair, then they proceed to strap him down with zip ties, uncomfortably tight. And he is held down by zip ties in very numerous ways to a very heavy-duty chair. And he is then placed inside the cabinet, and the curtains are closed, and then a checker holds Darren's hands at all times. And the only time Darren will let go of that person's hand is in the aspect of, hey, I'm going to turn on this music, and then I'm going to turn it off. And he's announcing it to everyone. The checker then says, yes, I do feel him moving his hand. I do feel him holding my hand again. It's all extremely, extremely regimented. Now, there's always going to be skeptics out there. I respect skeptics, but for the matter of this, I'm just discussing everything that happens because a lot of work goes into making sure that this is not fraudulent. And so during the seance, it is done in the dark. But what starts happening is you can, as your eyes adjust, you start being able to see some of these toys that are in the center of everyone in the circle. And you'll start seeing them move. You'll start seeing and hearing the drum go off. And it's not like a mechanical drum. It's just a child's drum with sticks. And you'll hear the drum beating. And you'll hear this bell that they have to chime. All these things will start happening because the spirits are using his energy that he's producing as a physical medium that he's trained to do, using it to become physical in the world that we live in order to show their physical presence and give evidence that they are there. This bear was manipulated and moved around the room, and at one point was thrown at my feet. And I remember feeling it, I remember seeing it being placed in the middle of the room when we first started. And then I remember feeling it. So everyone's next to me, so I can feel their feet next to me on either side of my feet. I can feel the bear roll onto the top of my feet from like this direction. There was no way that there was anyone in front of me because I live in the dark. I have really good eyesight in the dark. I did not see anyone moving here, but I could feel and kind of see the bear roll onto my feet. The toys are played with for a little while by a bunch of children and about a child spirits and a couple of adults. And then then Darren says, I'm going to turn on a red light. And he turns on this red light in order not to hurt our eyes. And we can see that all the toys have been moved around. There's no one standing up, and he kind of turns it on kind of suddenly sometimes. And you don't hear footsteps. You hear no footsteps. You do not hear any movement, no chairs moving, nothing. And all of a sudden, he'll turn on this red light, and this bear is in front of me. And so we finish the seance, we go on, and you're able to donate to this organization that they donate to that helps give money for needy causes, and by buying some of these toys that have been touched. And I chose to get this one because I later found I felt drawn to it. I really loved the bear. It reminded me something of my grandmother had given me when I was a child. And it was really awesome because I didn't realize that later, this past March, my boyfriend got me a 23andMe thing, and I found out that I'm Scottish, and I did not know that. And so that was really interesting because it says Scotland on the bear, and it ended up in front of me, and later found out that I'm Scottish. That's spirit. That's conscious connection there. That's how you can tell if objects are being moved by a consciousness. There's an intention there to share information, to teach, to raise you up as an individual. I have kept this bear, and I leave it in my spirit room in case a loved one wants to move it. It freaks my partner out because he's terrified that he's going to find it somewhere else in the house, kind of like off on the shelf, but like bear somewhere. So I love this thing because I know it has been physically touched and manipulated and moved by a conscious spirit. And so there are signs for that. Now, when we're talking about how the spirit world can physically touch these things, you don't have to be in a seance for this to happen. I have had my mother affect the kitchen. I can hear the stove creaking as if it turns on. I have had a light turn on out of nowhere, things like that. And so this is perfectly normal, especially if there's something electronic, because there's already energy connected to it. So it's easier for them to mess with. So this is how we know as mediums where there is actual evidence of conscious spirits messing with physical objects. To people who are unaware of what's going on, it absolutely could seem like an object is haunted. This is where education and development comes in, and having the wherewithal to think outside of media, TV, fiction. It's okay to think how cool it might be that there might be a child who loves playing with this regularly. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't go to the straight assumption that they're trapped in this doll. It's just not happening. Last but not least, I want to talk about the fact that these energy echoes can be sensed in a skill called psychometry, and that is Psychometry. Psychometry is this ability to train yourself to sense energy in an object and read its history. This would be reading where it comes from, reading if the energy is male or female from the person who created it, or non-binary, or transgender, or whatever it is. Being able to touch an object and see memories of the people who lived there, get addresses, get information based on this object. That is what psychometry is. It is not a super common skill, but it is a skill every single person can learn to do. Most of the psychics and mediums that I know are able to do this. I love doing psychometry. I love it. It's a passion of mine. I don't do it nearly as often as I'd like to, because COVID, and I don't have physical people at my home much anymore. But I'm not gonna let people send me their valuables or send me their stuff. So yeah, but I do have friends who'll come over and they'll be like, "Hey, could you read into this?" And I'm like, "Sure." They'll hand me an object and I'll start relating to it, and I'll start creating a relationship with it, and I'll start my work, like I'm already getting connected to like feeling of energy building, and I'm just working, with my energy, and I'll let it tell me a story, and I'll let it give me its energy, and I'll talk to it, and I'll work with it as if I'm talking to a person, and I'll treat that energy as it's alive, because it technically is, but it's not conscious, but it is alive, and I will let it show it its memories to me, and I'll get information, and I'll say, do you understand this? And they'll say yes or no, and I will give them as much as I can. I'm not the best at it. I just love doing it, and I want to get better. And so I have someone gave me this this cross, this organic made cross, looked like wood, and I held it, and I was like, oh, this comes from Northern Ireland. And she's like, well, how do you know? I said, I see it on a map. I see Northern Ireland. This is bog moss. This is bog soil. And she looked into it, and it came from Northern Ireland. And she's like, oh my God, how'd you do that? I was like, psychometry. And so psychometry is a great skill that anyone can learn to do, even you. No matter what you may think. Hold an object. Try to feel into it. The best thing I can tell you is that when it comes to sensing energy, you have to get away from a me statement. If you are thinking about what it makes you feel like personally, then you're not picking up the real energy. If you look at an object and you think, oh my God, this feels oppressive, this is something that's haunted, I feel afraid of it, that's all in your head. That's in your head, that's creating a story. Your body starts feeling the energy and you let it create a story. You can't do that. You have to be objective. You have to be unbiased and unaligned to fear, panic, happiness, all that. When you feel that energy coming in, it's neutral. It's not good or bad. It just is. And as you start feeling that energy, you have to allow it to sort of wash over you and let it drown you, essentially. And take you over, and then feel it, and then look at it outside of yourself. I feel anger. I feel pain. I feel like I got hit. Okay, this feels like abuse. Oh, well, this isn't about me because I've never experienced these things. Wait a minute, I don't feel it at me either. I feel like I'm watching a TV show or a movie. This feels like it's outside of me. Okay, the doll is not trying to attack you. There's no reason to. And so once you start realizing that you have to get out of the stories that our minds create, then you start realizing that you can get to the heart of the energy and really find details, find memories and history and so much information. There are mediums who work to provide this energetic information to businesses who are buying properties and want to know what that property has been through. Like, that's so amazing to me that a realtor might show up to a medium with a tile or a brick from a building they want to buy and be like, can you tell me the history of this building? And the medium will be like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. This is what I get. This is what I get. This is what I get. And then later be able to verify this by researching based on those parameters. Energy is eternal and immortal. It's why the soul crosses over back home, because it's energy that is immortal and eternal with a consciousness attached to it. But the energy that is left behind by echoes that we produce is not conscious. It is just extra that comes off of being alive. It's like friction. There's energy and heat that dissipates just by rubbing something together, but that energy, that heat, isn't going to warm anything. It's just being produced. But that friction allows movement. And it can be sometimes very physical. And that's what that energy inside objects is. It feels very physical because it's butting up against your living energy that is conscious. So I hope all of that makes sense. I hope all of this helps you understand haunted objects and energy echoes, like I like to call them, or residual energy to be a bit more technical. And I hope it helps explain to you psychometry and why we feel energy in objects, because it's part of being alive. If you have an aura, which if you're alive, you have an aura, you're going to feel energy in things, in places, in objects, and in dolls. But it doesn't mean it's haunted. It doesn't mean that you should look at it and be like, ah! Have a great day. As always, in love and light.